Well, with me now is the Chief Executive of the Henry Jackson Society, Alan Mendoza, as well as my very distinguished and somewhat theatrical panel. Alan, thank you for coming back on GB News. What have you heard about this definition of extremism?
Well,
and what does it aim to stop?
Well, I think what it aims to stop, firstly, is, as the definition is, extremism. But what I've heard about it, of course, is that we haven't yet got to the point where a definition has been unveiled, nor, if you like, the safeguards of which the mood music is heavy safeguards to make sure that the things that you have suggested will happen will not happen. But there is a danger, isn't there? There is a danger that if you define extremism in a certain way, you may have unintended consequences and people caught up in the net who are not extremists.
Well, it is a problem. It's actually a problem that occurred whilst I was in the Cabinet Office, because we tried to stop an extremist organisation going in to speak to civil servants, because one had gone in that was sympathetic to Islamic terrorism. And then, sometime after I'd left, it got interpreted to stop some professor who had once said something disagreeable about Brexit going in. And the Times got frightfully upset by this. But this was not what had ever been intended. It wasn't the purpose of the rule, but it was a self-policing overreach by the civil service. And that's what worries me about any definition of this kind.
Yes, and also I would say that it is liable to be interpreted perhaps differently by a government of a different colour. Imagine, for example, had there been a Corbyn government in this country, I mean, who might they have defined as extremists in this sort of regard? And that's why there needs to be a definition of extremism, and that's quite clear. But it's better to name what you want to sort of ban from government. So, yes, why don't we mention that we can ban the Islamists and ban the far right? That's the thing to go for. Go on that basis rather than sort of mealy-mouthed getting round the issue when we know what the problem is.
Yes, and definitional terms need to be very precise, don't they? They basically need to be encouraging violence. That if you're a far-right libertarian, if you're an Ayn Rand-style far-right, that I would have thought would be legal. But if you're a far-right British National Party, then that may be something you don't want going in to speak to the government.
Yes, I think that's the first line to be drawn is obviously on the violent side. I think you can make a case, I agree with you, not criticising institutions, that seems absurd. And I don't think that'll end up being in the definition, but, you know, undermining our democracy and by virtue of the ideology we believe in. For example, Islamism and fascism do not believe in our democratic institutions. That's quite easy to clarify, I think.
Who do you think should decide in these cases? Should the police take their lead from what politicians are saying about how the law should be enforced, or should their independence be so great that even when there's great public concern, they can just say, no, we're doing what we want?
Well, that clearly can't be the case because, of course, it's policing by consent in this country. We police by consent, but that means you also have to keep the confidence of people. And if people are in this country, as I think they are saying, that they're worried about what's happening on the streets, they're concerned about all sorts of things, actually, crime figures skyrocketing, the marches being, you know, sort of out of control, things like that. You have to ask whether the police independence is actually undermining themselves as opposed to the other side. And there can be guidelines quite clearly from the Commissioner or the Home Secretary to do this, basically. And I think that's absolutely right.